The U.S. is set to prepare a list of Turkey economic sanctions. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Ben Harvey on the phone from Istanbul. Ben, so I believe this is related to the imprisoned Pastor Andrew Burnson. Tell us a little bit about what's behind this.
Yeah, that's right. The U.S. and Turkey have been in negotiations actually extending back to the end of last year, where the U.S. has been trying to secure the release of Andrew Brunson. These talks are they're not just about Brunson, who's an evangelical pastor who's been in Turkey for a very long time, but also about other American citizens, including a NASA scientist and 3 employees of the U.S. diplomatic mission in Turkey who have all been jailed, and the U.S. considers them to be essentially political hostages.
So, Ben, there were reports that this was actually originally a 3-way trade involving Israel and someone who would be released by the Israelis. What's to be made of that? Was the person released from Israel or not?
Yes, she was. And yes, our sources have confirmed that, that was part of the deal, that in order to secure Brunson's release, President Trump would convince Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to release this Turkish woman who had been jailed in Israel on charges of aiding and abetting Hamas. And she returned to Turkey last week on Monday.
So, Ben, we know that these sanctions are being prepared under the Magnitsky Act of 2016. Tell us a little bit about how they are going to be modeled.
Sure, yeah. These sanctions were originally imposed on Russia. In 2016, they targeted the regime of Vladimir Putin and also oligarchs close to him. They were extended in 2016, and what they essentially allowed the U.S. to do is to go after any company or any person who is involved in human rights abuses or involved in corruption pretty much anywhere around the world. And this is what they're looking to do in Turkey now.
So the sanctions, would they be imposed against individuals? Because a lot of the sanctions imposed on Russia have actually been on individuals around President Putin. Are there individuals in Turkey that the United States could be targeting here?
Yes, exactly. It would be very much on the Russian model. They would target both individuals that they think are involved in what they call the miscarriage of justice, who are involved in the jailing of these American citizens or employees of the U.S. diplomatic mission here, and they could also be targeted against people who the U.S. says are corrupt and are somehow tied to Erdogan's government.
And of course, Ben, Turkey is part of NATO. Do we know at this point how this will affect relations with NATO?
Yeah, well, those relations are already very, very tense, very much on the brink of falling apart. If the U.S. decides to go through with this, you could imagine a situation where Turkey-U.S. ties and Turkey's ties to NATO are at a breaking point.
So thus far, Ben, Turkey has tied the release of this American pastor in Turkey to an extradition of a Turkish cleric who's living in Pennsylvania. At the same time, President Trump has said he's not going to do that. Has President Trump lost on this deal? If he made a deal for the release of by the Israelis, did he get burned?
Well, the sentiment from U.S. government sources that we're talking to is yes. They very much thought that they had a deal. As of last week, they thought that they had a deal. When Brunson was supposed to go on trial on Wednesday, they thought that this deal meant that he was going to be deported on that day. When that didn't happen, I think this is when you started to hear the U.S. officials, including the vice president and then Trump himself, talking openly about sanctions on Turkey.